to Level Pixel Level. In the last video, we added these spine controls. In this video, I'm going to add the leg IK controls. So it's going to be similar to what I did with the spine, where I actually just duplicated some of the bones from my deform rig, separated them, and then joined them. So I'll go to my deform rig here and turn it on. I'm just going to isolate it for a second. For these controls, I only need the leg controls. I'm going to do something different with the hip control here. I'm just going to avoid actually making it a control structure so I can keep my main controls a little bit more simple. I will duplicate these ones though, just so that I have them as controls for later on. So I'm going to select all the leg controls here. And I'm going to flip to edit mode, do Shift D, duplicate them, and then P to separate them. Okay, I'll come out of isolation mode, and now I have an extra night rig here, and I'm just going to join this to my control rig. So I hold Shift, I click on my control rig, and I just do Control J to join them. So let's just isolate the control rig now, and I just want to do a couple things. All of these are going to have the wrong name. So if I go to the bone name here, it's flap.001 and flap.001. I just want to change this to something else, but I did it on the spine through just renaming things. I'm going to do it here by code. So if I come to my text editor, I'm just going to write new code. So I'm actually going to flip to pose mode. I just like working with pose mode with code a little bit more. So bones equals bpy.context.selected pose bones. That's all the bones that I'll have selected in my rig in pose space. So I can say for each bone in bones, I'll do bone.name.replace, and the first thing I'll do is I'll replace .001, and I'll make it with nothing. Now this isn't actually going to replace anything. I actually just need to write bone.name equals. So what this is going to do is this is going to say, hey, my new bone.name just replace the .001 with nothing. And then I'm going to say bone.name equals, I think on my main, yeah, I added this main underscore here, so I'll do the same thing here. Equals main underscore plus bone.name. So now when I run this, it adds the main to the front of every single bone that I have selected here, and it also removes the .001 at the end. And I'll just save this going forward because I can just run this later on when I do other scripts as well too. You know what, let's wrap it up in a function, because I'll come back here for more scripts later on. I'll call this rename. Just select everything, just tab it over, and then I can just type rename here. And I have that nice function that I can call later on. The nice part about putting it into a function is that later on, if I wanted to, I could add this to an add-on and a really easy setup as a rename tool, if it was more advanced. Okay, so before I even add constraints here, let's actually connect the deform rig to this. So I'll come back to here. And again, on these controls, I added the constraints manually. So for each constraint, it just looked at the bone with the name in it with here. Let's do this actually dynamically. So I'll select on one bone here, and I'm going to do the same thing. So again, I'm just going to grab my bones here, and I'm going to say for bone in bones, bone.constraints.new, and I'm going to add a copy transforms. Then I can just do bone.constraints, because I know it's added, .target equals, I'm just going to make it to the control rig here, so I can just copy the name. And then I can do bone.constraints.subtarget. Here's where it gets interesting. Because I know the names are the same, I can just say equals main plus bone.name. The target takes a full data path, where the subtarget only takes a string. Which is really nice when you're working with it, because you can just actually input the string if you know your names are the same. So I'm just going to test it on this bone here. If I run this, I did get an error. Let's look at what that error is. Okay, I see the problem here is constraints doesn't actually call anything. I have to call the first constraint, which was made, which is the copy transform. So I'm just going to delete this, and I'm going to run it again, and ran into another error there. Let's check it out. Oh, here it is right here. I just spelled constraints wrong. So I delete this again and run it. Perfect, it should add that copy transforms. Now, when I select all my bones, and run it on all of these, it should add all of my copy transforms for me. Cool. So I have that banked now for later on. Okay, let's move back to the control rig now and see what that looks like. So now if I rotate this bone here, my leg rotates. Perfect. And if I rotate this leg here, that's going to move that. Cool. So that's ready to go. Okay, I'm just going to isolate my control rig now for a second. And I'm going to start building my IK. This bone here, let's add a new control. So I'm going to duplicate my root sub up here, and this is actually going to be something called the hip control. So I'm just going to rename this to hip. And I'm actually going to parent the spine and the pelvis to it. I'm also going to parent all 4 of these bones to it as well too, just to that hip bone there. So now when I move this around, the entire spine and the character is going to move like that. Let's change this up though. Let's grab these 2 controls here. I'm going to shift click on this sub root here and parent that there. So now when I move this, I get something like this. Now from the foot to here, I'm going to add my inverse kinematics. So I'm going to add inverse kinematics, and I'll just set my chain length here to 2. And I'll do the same thing from here to here. I'll add an inverse kinematics. By the way, I'm selecting on the target and then the one I want the constraint on. I'm doing Control-Shift-C, and that's add constraints with targets and doing inverse kinematics. And I'm just setting my chain length to 2. Now when I move my hip control here, cool, I get a bending knee, and I get the pull away there. And I can rotate it like that. Yep, that's looking great. So let's see what that looks like on the knight. Cool. This is the first time I've seen him kind of move around like this. It's kind of exciting. So I have this really nice foot control. I can just isolate that and check out what that's going to look like. I do see some problems with my weighting now, which always usually happens once you get to IK, but this is really cool and exciting. I haven't seen him move this much yet. So let's isolate this rig again, and this isn't the nicest control for an IK, so I'm going to grab the foot controls. I'll just turn on X mirror actually while I'm doing this. And I'm just going to duplicate this back, and I'll just snap it back to here. I'm going to rotate it around. I guess, so I want these to be in world space. I could snap the tail to the head, move it on the Y, but what I can do is actually select these, click on the God control, and there's an option here in your transforms called Align Bones, and that's Control-Alt-A. So if I do Control-Alt-A, it actually aligns them to the God bone here. So you have them selected, and you shift click on the one you want it to align to, and you can do Control-Alt-A. Or you go to Armature Transform, Align Bones. So I'm going to take these foot controls here and actually parent them to this one here. So I'll shift click on it, shift click on this one, flip back to edit mode, keep offset. Now this will move my IK, and that becomes my controller there. So let's add a shape for that. I'm going to add a circle, and I'll just move it over. And let's just look at the character here. So these are the controllers that I want. So these ones here, I'm just going to add it to a custom shape here. And it's circle.003. I'll probably come back through and name all of these eventually. Just right now I'm being a little bit lazy with my naming just to get things moving around. So now that I have those controls, I can actually come to my circle 3 and actually move it and change it. So first thing I can do is actually move it right down to the ground, just so I have it near the surface. Then I can move it forward. I'm doing all this kind of blind, so I'm just hitting GY to move it, but I don't need to see it while I'm doing that. I can just do GY and just eyeball the actual controller. Now I can do scale X to move it like that, and scale Y just to make it a little bit longer. Cool, that's looking nice. Let's try it out. Cool. I'm gonna have to do something with this to give it some dynamics, but I think I can figure that out later on. Let's try this one. Yeah, that's looking cool. So let's do one last thing. Let's add these to some bone groups. So I'm going to do IK bones. I'm going to add another one called IK control. These two I'll put into here. The IK control, I'll just make them orange for now. And these ones I'll just add to my IK bones for now. I'll make these green. For the last part of the IK, let's just add some pull targets. I can do a pretty simple pull target for this character, so I can just duplicate these up. I'll snap them to the knee. I turned on snap right there, and I can snap them there, and I'll just duplicate them forward. If I select back on the control with the IK target, I can specify the pull target as being my knight control rig. And I'm just going to click on this and rename it to main pull left. Let's do leg left, actually. Let's duplicate that name over. And I'll input it as the bone right here. Now it did flip around by 90 degrees. I've spoken in detail as to why that happens before. I'll leave a link in the description for that as well too, where I've talked about why that flips. I've talked about it in my IK tutorial. For this tutorial, I'm just going to make it -90 to bring it back to looking at the pull target. Very quickly, what it is trying to do, if I turn on the axes, is it wants the x-axis here to look at the pull target. That's how the pull target works in Blender, is that this x-axis wants to point towards the pull target. So when I have that value at 0, you'll see that my x-axis right here is pointing towards the pull target. If I just turn off my IK, you can see it's snapping. Now I could have built my rig to be pointing on the X by default. I didn't do that. It's not the end of the world. I can just put this pull angle at -90. I'm okay with doing that. I just think it's good to know why you're doing that on a rig. And it's just because that axis on the bone is pointing towards the pull target. And then this is just giving it an offset, more or less. Let's do the same thing to this bone here. Knight control rig, and I'll just paste the name in here. I think I just named these wrong, actually. I think this one should be my left and the other one should be my right. So I'll just fix that. What's great about Blender is the constraint names will fix themselves automatically as you rename things. Okay, let's see that. I'm just going to flip off axes. So now when I bend this knee, cool. That's looking really good. It's looking really fun. Okay, I'm just going to add a shape to the pull targets really quick, just to make them look a little bit cooler. So I'm going to add a circle, drag it over. This one I know what it's going to look like pretty quick. I don't actually need the circle, I just like working with it as a starting point. So I'm going to select a square here. What I can do is just duplicate these up. I just need the points and delete these. Select these, hit F to make a line. Just polymodeling now. I can duplicate that up again. And in a very complicated way, I've made a cube. But I made a cube without any faces, which is what I sort of want for this shape. So I'll input these. I think it's circle 4. Now I can come back to here on this actual shape and just edit it live to see what it's going to do. What I usually do is select on the rig so it shows up in orange, then shift click on the shape here. And now I can just scale this and scale this. And I'll just grab these pieces here and scale them in as well. Cool. So that's a really nice pull shape for that bone right there. So that's where I'll pause for today. In the next video, I'll probably clean up a little bit of weight painting. I noticed a couple issues with the leg right now. I'll probably add some sort of rig for this guy right here so it's always following the legs. I have a couple ideas for that just so it's not colliding all the time. And then the video after that, we'll start to work on the arms. Big thank you to my patrons for supporting me in this video. It's because of you guys that I can keep making this video. Head on over there if you want early access to all this content, some behind the scenes, and some exclusive features. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.